Karyn. Thank you very
Hi.
much for spending some time with me talking about the wonderful world of your films.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, really excited to talk to you. I think, you've become very much sort of a formidable director, writer, producer
Mhm.
within Hollywood. So it's great to sit down and talk with yourself. So
Thank you.
let's talk about your first film, Girlfight.
Mhm.
This was your first feature debut film, which you wrote and directed. And I was curious to know, what were some of the big lessons that you learned as a first-time feature director?
As I've gotten older and farther away from that first film, I think what I think a lot about is the benefits of naivete and the benefits of not knowing all that much about how the business works. In a funny way, I think if I'd known more of the incredible odds against anyone getting to make their first film, I might have felt more discouraged day to day. And so, in some respects, I like to encourage young filmmakers to stay curious in the world and interested in films, interested in what they love. Um, Engaged with all of that so that the noise around how hard it is isn't quite so um, crushing.
Hmm. Yeah. Did you find any sort of, again, any sort of hurdles when it came to writing as well, sort of in that first
Oh,
feature film?
oh yeah. I mean, I probably wrote, I don't know, 15 drafts of the
Mm.
script. It was really very, very rough when I started it. It was very unformed. And I was a relatively new and inexperienced writer. So it took me, some time to shape the material on a structural level, on an emotional level. Um, and I really recommend as well that you keep working on something until it feels cooked, for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, because did it take you about 7 years to make Girlfight?
Yeah, it took a long time. It took many, many years. It was many drafts of the script. It was many iterations. It was a lot of financing that came together and fell
Mm.
apart. So it was a very long and arduous process for me to get the film made.
So obviously, it's not just your debut feature film, but obviously Michelle Rodriguez, your lead
Mm.
actor. So how did that
Mhm.
feel having that shared experience with your lead actress, both going into it in the same sort of point?
Yeah, I think it was a really important um, formative experience for me because what I had learned about her was, I got to see her as a non-actor. She started without any experience, and then I really worked with her to step into that role and step into the job of showing up every day and being in almost every frame of the film. And I realized for me how important it was to bring that relationship to every actor I work with.
Mhm.
And all actors need a certain amount of acknowledgement, respect, checking in, a sense of a human to human relationship that I think maybe doesn't always get discussed in film schools or in, sort of the technical training of what it is we do.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I remember being taught that at film school, sort of understanding the actors and to, like taking acting classes to kind of understand what it
Hmm.
feels like to be on the other side of the camera is always a great thing. And I
Hmm.
think, yeah, like you say, that relationship is essential when it comes to knowing how they work as well as how you work. So yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's
Um,
also really important to remember how vulnerable actors are when they're working, and
yeah.
our job as directors is to sort of meet them there, actually, not stand apart from it, but kind of live in that vulnerable
Mm.
space with them.
Yeah, I mean, Diana goes through a lot of emotions in this film, so I think,
Yeah,
yeah, to sort of have that sort of relationship with Michelle was clearly important for yourself and for her. So yeah, I get that.
totally, totally.
So obviously you've worked with like Michelle, which is very like new to the sort of acting scene, and you have obviously gone on to do other things, sort of
Mm.
with young actors and sort of just getting into the industry with, you know, shows such as Yellow Jackets. How do you sort of approach, if you could sort of expand on that a little bit further about your approach to young or sort of new people in the industry?
Um, I think it's really important to actually be quite transparent about what what it is I'm trying to achieve with them. So for instance, I'm I'm looking for the sense that we are in the presence of a real person. And I'm trying to make that really clear to the actors as I work with them, that a lot of my job is to detect inauthenticity or a surface level that needs to go deeper.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really important to keep talking about, like, what's the true moment here, the honest moment, the surprising moment, and to keep the actors feeling like they can do anything. They can try anything, and it may not work, but they can trust me to protect the performance and shape the performance. So even if something doesn't work, it won't end up in the finished film.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely that sort of ability to be vulnerable, but also trust you to choose like the right take and what
Yeah,
you've got, what you want from that scene. So yeah, again,
yeah,
it's those fundamentals, I imagine, in terms of that sort of initial relationship you have with an actor.
yeah. And I think something that I really saw with Michelle, and it's something I've carried with me in all of my relationships with actors, is I encourage them to feel open to making a fool of themselves and to playing and to trying things that are really that go too far or go into a direction that's absolutely wrong. Sometimes you need to experience that as the actor and as the director on my end. You need to know for sure that it's not something you want to explore further. But the only way you can really know that sometimes is by seeing it. And
Yeah.
so, it's worth reminding everyone that our job is to make mistakes and to um, try things that don't work and recover.
Yeah,
That's a
just like
big
life.
part of the process. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So obviously in Girlfight we have a lot of sort of boxing scenes and those. How is it to film those sort of fighting action scenes? Obviously there's some sort of domestic situations. How is that to sort of, you know, film and choreograph in the film?
I worked with a really good stunt coordinator. I knew a lot about boxing. I was a boxer myself. I had become very embedded in the world of amateur boxers in Brooklyn, particularly. So it was something that came pretty naturally to me to understand the sort of the shape of how um, the sport can kind of tell a story within the ring. And so I tried to look at each time that Diana enters the ring as a kind of consequential moment in storytelling, and strategy, and a shift in approach and a shift in my approach in terms of how I was visualizing those encounters was how I was advancing the story. So I took a lot of time trying to kind of figure out how, say, the first fight is so different from the last fight, and that kind of help be a guiding principle for me.
Yeah, and obviously the emotional weight we get, sort of, you know, it means so much when you get that sort of end fight and, you know, the
Hmm.
journey and the sort of romantic, you know, story we have within
Yes.
that as well. It's got a lot more weight to it, I think, by the time at the end of the film.
Mm, yeah. Thank you.
So as I say, Dinah gets to fight a lot of men, which isn't always
Hmm.
necessarily seen on the big screen, especially in the year
Right.
2000. So how
Mm.
important was it for you to have this empowering lead character who kind of broke down those sort of gender barriers at the time?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think what it came out of for me was the reality of when I was training as a boxer myself in the 90s, and what I was seeing was that there were just so few women in the gyms that the only people I could spar with were other men. I mean, there were a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, I was always sparring with men. And, you know, that takes on a kind of meta quality because in some ways that's, in retrospect, when I look back, that was the film business. That's many industries, many spheres of work and experience in which it's kind of gender imbalanced. And I do think the amateur world of the sport, because it's based on weight, you know, every bout is based on are people within a similar weight class. It allowed me to kind of, I guess, take this imaginative leap that there could be boys and girls in the ring together. And for me, knowing that there are going to be some people who watch it and kind of just reject it outright, I was more interested not in the um, day-to-day reality of that premise, but the emotional reality of it. Like, what does it mean to feel like aggression, animus, technique, strategy is all bound up in also this concept of gender relations, romantic relations. And I just thought there was something very interesting about that and had a kind of operatic quality that, you know, may not work for everybody, but I found it really a compelling, imaginative space to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my sort of trials and tribulations, you know, in playing sport or, you know, again, in the sort of film industry. There's definitely still that imbalance and, you know, having to
Oh, yeah.
do those other kind of fighting, you know, day to day, you
Yeah.
know, I feel that. So yeah, I was very much
Yeah.
rooting for Diana.
Yeah, that's great.
Obviously, Girlfight has entered the Criterion Collection, which is
Mm.
amazing. How does that
Mm.
feel for you, Karyn, in terms of having this sort of recognized by Criterion?
Oh, it's so great. I had such a great time. I was able to pull together a lot of old elements that I found in storage boxes and be reminded of how much I thought about the film and how much I prepared for it and how much I couldn't know possibly going into it what I was gonna have to sort of face as a filmmaker, a young filmmaker. And so it was a really humbling, wonderful thing to go back in time and look at
Mm.
the process of getting the film made. It was such a joy.
It's definitely going to open up to a lot of, you know, the younger generations and, you know, people who've never would think to watch it, but they want to, you know, collect those films.
Yeah,
So, you know, it's going to be great. You know, it's a lot more people going to see your feature film, which is going to be amazing.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope that's true. Thank you.
Do you have any advice for any new and emerging sort of directors trying to make their first films and how that might be different, you know, in today's standards for a similar sort
Yeah,
of project?
yeah, it's really interesting because the only constant about this business is that it keeps changing and that any model that we think is a standard, whether it's about budget or execution or the style of shooting or the equipment you use or how your films even get seen and absorbed by the culture, that continues to change. But I do think that the constant that remains for all filmmakers, but particularly for young filmmakers, is something about a, a genuine sincerity in the work, and it doesn't mean necessarily emotional earnestness, but
Mm,
a kind of sincerity of mission, a sincerity of vision, a sense of being out on an edge where you're still learning as the filmmaker and we the audience get to see that.
yeah.
So it's the feeling of watching people um, finding their voice, flexing their voice, hitting the wrong notes sometimes really singing. That is what we're looking for, I think, from younger filmmakers, and truly from all filmmakers. But I think it's so important to not overthink your first film, but really ask yourself, am I feeling anything by it? By reading this script, by imagining this story, when looking at this cut, do I feel anything? Because now more than ever, I think we're in a time where we need to feel things in order to be reminded of our aliveness, and that's what art does. And so that's what young filmmakers need to be hooking into all the time as they're working.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's some great advice. Just feel that emotional connection, make something tangible, and just make it for yourselves, I think, is the key thing.
Yeah,